and thank all of you for your testimony. Been watching you on C-SPAN. I think there are two pieces to our strategy, and you've been covering those. One is to make sure we make the necessary investments here at home to stay at the cutting edge of chips technology and AI. And obviously, those are linked. The other is to use export controls to try to maintain our edge and deny China, for example, access to at least our highest end chips and also the equipment that you can use to develop the highest end chips. In that regard, Mr. Allen, I know you spoke favorably about a rule that the Trump administration issued earlier this year, the affiliates rule, which seems to make common sense, right? Which is if we have an entities list and we decide that companies on that list should not receive the highest end US technologies, that we should close the loophole that would allow them to create a subsidiary or another corporate form and do an end run. That was a good rule, was it not?
Yes, it absolutely was. And in my own analysis of this topic, I'll just tell you, at one point in my work in the DoD, I was asked to review an entity listing. And I found that there was a Chinese company that had been entity listed, and then we'd found a shell company subsidiary. And apparently, this was 6 years after we had entity listed the first company, and we found that the shell company had been operating for at least 5 of those 6 years. And the point is that the Chinese ability to play legal whack-a-mole here is they can create new companies in weeks. Our very rule of law oriented, which has its advantages, approach does not take weeks to detect all of this stuff. And so what you need are rules that are simple and broad. The export controls that we have that are working the best are the countrywide export controls. Those are the ones where we've gotten by far the most bang for buck. And other kinds of rules, like the affiliates rules, I think are a prerequisite for the entity list to have any kind of enduring relevance in the future.
Now, I appreciate that, and the BIS over at the Department of Commerce described this as a, quote, vital tool for national security when it was issued. And I have to say that many of us were surprised and disappointed when President Trump abandoned, or at least suspended for a year, this rule when he met with President Xi in South Korea. Do you share that concern and disappointment?
Yes, I do not think national security should be something horse-traded in any kind of negotiation. I think export controls can have two purposes. They can be made to look tough, or they can be made to be tough. And I think there's really no point in doing anything other than trying to be tough. And these are table stakes for being tough and effective in the modern era.
I appreciate that. And, the head of NVIDIA flew out there, and I don't know if Senator Schatz raised it, but, we've got to be willing to stand up for our national security interests and not trade them off against some of these other interests. Speaking of that, I do want to get to the AI diffusion rule, because I saw a podcast you did back in the day when the Biden administration issued the diffusion rule, which, as you know, set up different categories of countries based on our concern or the risk that our technology, high-end AI and chips technology, would fall into other hands, specifically hands of our adversaries and specifically China. And the UAE, for example, was put not in one of those categories that we had to be guarded, that we had to put up some restrictions and monitoring systems. And I saw you speaking, I think, favorably about that rule. That rule is no longer in place with respect to the UAE, is it?
No, it is not, Senator.
I mean, the Trump administration abandoned the diffusion rule, and you're aware that it was just shortly before President Trump visited the UAE that the Trump administration scrapped that rule. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. And it also scrapped that rule shortly after Eric Trump had preceded the president to visiting the UAE and did a deal with a company called MGX, whereby MGX invested in the Trump family crypto enterprise. And then, very shortly thereafter, President Trump shows up, abandons the diffusion rule, and decides to provide important U.S. technology to G42, another UAE-owned entity. The chair of both entities is the same person, is it not, Mr. Allen?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Right. And he's a member of the royal family there. And I do think as a committee, we should be concerned. The House, on a bipartisan basis, when the Biden administration was in office, expressed lots of concern about abandoning the diffusion rule. And yet the diffusion rule was just abandoned by the Trump administration. So I have to say, both the chairman and the ranking member, this is something that worries me greatly because, as we said, we need a two-pronged strategy. Invest here at home, but also have and as you said, how important it is, Mr. Allen, a vigorous and well-enforced regime to prevent high-end technology from falling in the hands of our adversaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.